I think it's time to go ahead and make a video about this Tandy 1000 computer. And on this video, we're going to actually go into depth on this computer. How would you think about that, huh? I'm not going to just show you the ports and talk about it and not even turn it on. No. We're going to have a look inside of this computer, and we're going to have a little bit of a demonstration of what it can do. Which isn't a whole lot, but it's actually pretty fun. So stay tuned. This is a Tandy 1000 personal computer. Currently the oldest computer in my collection at this time, and surprising for its age, it's actually in flawless working order. And it's not too bad physically either. There are quite a few parallels between this computer, or perhaps this time period in the mid to late 80s, and the modern computers of today. This was acquired from a network client's basement of mine as pretty much a complete system, but was missing the keyboard. I do have original software discs and the manuals for this thing as well. I searched that basement high and low for that keyboard, but it was not to be found, unfortunately. I sat on this computer for a while till I decided to give in and purchase a keyboard from Fleabay. Unfortunately, to use these old Tandy 1000 computers, you really need to have the original keyboard. But compared to the going prices of XT compatible keyboards, especially the AT-XT switchable keyboards, they're not crazy priced, but I think $30 is a bit crazy for an old keyboard in general. Other option was to build an Arduino based converter board, upload the firmware to it to translate XT, AT or PST keyboards to a Tandy 1000 interface, but that would cost much more money and be very time consuming to build, compared to just forking up $30 or so to get the proper keyboard. The keyboard is in pretty good condition, just needs a good cleaning of the keycaps. This keyboard uses 3rd generation Fujitsu leaf spring mechanical switches, as opposed to the Cherry MX switches that most mechanical keyboards used. This is, however, a very loud sounding keyboard. Similar sound and feel, in my opinion, to the Macintosh keyboard of the time period. But I like the layout better than the Macintosh one. The keys move slightly smoother and is a bit less travel. The layout of this keyboard for the most part matches the QWERTY keyboard layout that we're all used to. I like the way Tandy designed the look of the keyboard to match the case, with the same rounded edges. The width of the keyboard matches the width of the computer itself, and the textured plastic matches that of the case. I get the sense that this particular person that was in charge of designing the aesthetics of the computer probably had a little bit of an OCD. This is the second model of Tandy 1000 computer. Only by looking at the model number on the back of this case is it seen that this is actually a Tandy 1000A. A slightly bug-fixed revision with a math coprocessor socket added to the motherboard, and the ability to scan for add-on ROMs. The Tandy MS-DOS version 2.11 included with this system date this manufacturing back to about 1985. The original Tandy 1000 was released in 1984, and these cost roughly $2,400 as a complete system, though I'm unclear at this time of recording this as to what $2,400 actually got you. $2,400 in 1985 money is equivalent to about $5,200 in today's money, which really shows how expensive computers were back then. Taking a look at the back side here, you can see there's a memory expansion card installed, bringing the system up to a whopping 640K of RAM. Taking a little bit closer look along the bottom here, you can see that it has a composite mono audio jack and color video output, presumably so you can plug this into a VCR or directly to your TV with an RF converter instead of having to buy an actual computer monitor. The RGB 9-pin Tandy color graphics adapter, or TCGA, monitor output, light pin, and an edge connector coming from the motherboard for the printer cable. Yes, I do actually have the printer cable that came with this. It's a big long blue ribbon cable. The one big parallel between this system and modern computers is everything here is built onto the motherboard pretty much. The sound generator, the video, printer port, and even the floppy disk controller was built right onto the motherboard. This was not something that was typically done by traditional PC clone manufacturers of the day, or the clone makers that made just motherboards. In fact, not even the IBM AT or XT hardware standard called for such devices to be placed on the motherboard. These guys didn't just make an exact clone of the IBM XT computer, they added their own hardware to the motherboard in addition to the IBM hardware standard, which was already out there. Which also explains the proprietary serial 8-pin keyboard, as this was their attempt to make a slightly better XT keyboard basically. On the front, you'll notice a very large red reset button, which yes is needed for some of the games I have tried, as there was no way I could find to get exited out of the game back to DOS. Keyboard port and 2 joystick ports can be seen here as well. The storage devices of choice and cost is 2 double-sided 720K floppy disk drives. The case is rather interesting for the time period. The entire outer case and front of the case is all one molded piece of plastic. I'm guessing injection molded ABS plastics here, but that's a pure guess honestly. There's 2 screws that hold the entire case on along the bottom of the front of it here, which are painted to match the color of the casing here. And removing these 2 screws allows the entire front and top cover to slide off as one piece. The lower half of this case is aluminum, it's not steel. And this was done to shed a little bit more weight from the computer, making this considerably lighter than any of the computers back in the day, except for those all-in-one things where you had the keyboard and everything was integrated into one piece there. So let's go ahead and have a look inside of this Tandy 1000A and see what $5,200 in today's money bought you for a computer. This is one large Tandy designed green motherboard that's in this case, taking up the entire case, which is also typical for computers of this time period. 3 8-bit ISA slots exist, with one slot being occupied by the memory expansion board. Installed is an AMD 8088 central processing unit here, XT class of course, clocked at a whopping 4.77 MHz. This is not a dual-speed CPU with a turbo function enabled to clock it up to 7.16 MHz. That didn't come until a little bit later in the Tandy 1000's life, and that's also true of pretty much every AT and XT class machine back in this time period. The Mathco processor socket is empty, but I do have an AMD Mathco processor to shove in here, so that may end up finding its way into this computer at some point. As previously mentioned, Tandy designed this motherboard to include pretty much everything the typical consumer PC would have installed into an ISA slot already integrated onto the motherboard. The sound generator, or what we would think of today as just onboard sound, but obviously quite a bit more primitive. The onboard video, and in this case it's in the form of Tandy's own custom 16 color graphics adapter, which was also capable of traditional CGA and monochrome display, floppy disk controller, and printer port. What is missing though is a genuine serial port. Although the keyboard is a serial device, I guess serial devices were not all that common in 1985, so they didn't bother to include that on the motherboard. The Tandy color graphics adapter was an enhancement to the CGA standard. CGA had 16 colors in its hardware palette to choose from, but could only display 4 of those at any one time. Tandy designed their graphics adapter to be CGA compatible and still have 16 colors to choose from, but it was capable of displaying all 16 colors at one time, at least until you got up to the 600 by 200 resolution, and then it dropped to 4 colors at a time. The keen observer will notice here that there's no hard drive or disk controller installed in this computer. Hard drives were a high-end luxury item for a computer to have back then, and thus most consumer PCs of this time period didn't come with them, nor did most consumers even bother spending the money for a hard drive. $1,700 in today's money bought you a 10 megabyte hard drive card from Tandy. Not to mention those old hard drives were rather crude by even 90s standards and were not terribly reliable. $128K of memory lives on the motherboard, with the expansion card adding another $512K, giving us a total of $640K system memory. And I don't have a clue why the back of this card has a sheet of aluminum screwed to it. My only guess is it has something to do with FCC compliance to reduce the RF interference coming from the memory and possibly passing to the memory. There's a bit of warping going on with this board, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the stability or the performance. So I guess it's warped into a happy place right now. Boy, I wish we all could be warped into a happy place. There's also an interesting pin header coming out of this board just above the ISO slot. I can only imagine what this might have been used for. There were ability to add a second memory card to the system, so I'm guessing that might be what this was for, but the system could only handle 640K of memory, so unless you had two cards that were less than 640K, I don't think you could have used two of them in this system. It possibly could have been also used for another card to communicate directly with the memory subsystem. A video overlay board comes to mind, possibly. I don't think the hard cards would have had anything to do with this connector, but it's possible maybe there were a couple that did. Maybe the Tandy board did, assuming of course that anything was ever designed to make use of it. It's a bit like the VESA connector on video cards back in the 90s. And last but not least, the 120 volt finger chopper of a fan mounted on the back of this computer. Well, I guess about all there is to do is put the cover back on and fire this bad boy up and demonstrate this machine to the horror of the real computer collector I might had. I use my vintage computers. I don't collect electronics just to sit on a shelf and oogle them while I play with myself. So here we go. Listen to all 5 1/4 inches of 720K floppy drive working that disc up and down. I will refrain from demoing this computer on YouTube with the strip poker disc that I have, although apparently I'm the only one that loses closes with this game, showing how much I suck at poker. I haven't seen anything interesting yet in that game, so don't get too excited. You're not missing anything. So I'll show you one of my favorite games so far that I have in the collection, and that's good old-fashioned Tetris. I did find 2 joysticks, amazingly enough, at the thrift store after I acquired this machine, but I have yet to find a game in this box that works correctly with them. The only thing that works is the button. And I know that the joystick portion, the stick portion itself works because I did get it to work, but I can't seem to get the games to calibrate correctly, so I'm not sure if these things are totally 100% compatible with this Tandy 1000. I'm assuming they are, but so far neither of them works properly. And finally, we'll come to another game that I found at the thrift store, along with Jeopardy, which I haven't been able to get to work on this machine yet. And that is Wheel of Fortune, with Tandy 1000 right there on the box as a compatible machine to have. And it's something to demonstrate the sound and video capabilities of this machine. And just a word of caution, beware of the flicker. Brightness and refresh rates really got screwed with this camera with these old CRT monitors, so I tried to work through it here as best I could. This game takes about 10 minutes from the time I type in wheel.exe to the time I can actually start playing the game. Boy. But once I play the game, once the game gets loaded up, it works just fine.
Meter reader. Well, I was completely wrong on that one.
As someone said in an old write-up of these Tandy computers, they don't die. Apparently they don't. This thing, it's been running quite well actually, and I have no idea how long it's sat without power in that basement. Probably a good long time. Thing that sucks about these old machines, especially this one anyway, and some of them around this time period, there's no RTC in them, which is nice. The fact that you don't have a battery to worry about leaking all over and destroying the motherboard, but it kind of sucks to have to keep setting that date, which I don't really bother with. Doesn't matter if it's 1985, 1995. It's an old computer. So, but yeah, this is a good machine. They ain't worth a damn though, unfortunately. About $50, but that's, I'm pretty sure, because most people don't sell them with the keyboards. And unfortunately, you have to have the appropriate keyboard for it. Yes, there's ways to make your own converter, but you have to have the keyboard. And if you don't have the keyboard, you cannot use this thing at all. I sat on this thing for about 6 months before I finally decided to get a keyboard for it. I have another computer that I pulled out of that basement as well. It's going to be coming up very soon. So here's a preview of that. And until next time, take care everyone. Peace out.
That BIOS is only 3 hours off. I just cannot believe that.